welcome back to Life Changing Solutions, the show. Today, the topic is Let Your Mess Be Your Message, and I'm Angie Torres, your host, so let's get to it. Okay, parents, you're probably going to be the ones to relate the most to this, but if you don't have kids, you can think to any kid around you, your nieces, your nephew, or even yourself when you were little. Picture this. Little kid comes home from school and it's like, Mommy, I did something awesome. I made something for you. And you're like, what is it? And they turn around and they have something like this. And you're like, what is that? Because all we see initially is one big mess, right? But the little kid is just so excited and just can't wait to show it to you because they're so proud of themselves. Well, this is something that we lose as adults. And so this is something that I'm going to talk about today and presence it. Because the thing is, if you really take a deeper look, and actually I got to stop and thank my daughter, who's now 12, who did me the favor of drawing this, so thank you. But when the 5-year-old comes home with this, and it's like a big old messy picture or a stack of noodles and macaroni stuff, and they're so proud of themselves, they don't see this as a mess. This is their masterpiece. And usually if you ask them like what it is, there's a huge message behind it. Sometimes, you can be like these little pink lines for them. That means the love that they feel at home. The green is, the pretty grass that they have in the backyard. And the blue is daddy. The red is mommy. And, they can just go on and on and on. And they get so much. This represents so much to them. And it's one big mess. But really, it carries a big message. So my question to you is, how often do you lose your message in your mess? Or you allow the mess to keep you back? Something that I've experienced in working with people is that because they made mistakes in their past, they blame themselves and hold themselves responsible and then punish themselves and hold back and don't make things happen in their life because of the mess that they made. Sometimes they'll hide behind it and they'll use it as an excuse, like, I can't possibly go out there and do this and make things happen in my life because, I made some mistakes in the past, or I made a mess of myself, or, I had these addictions, or whatever it is. And you hold back and you keep yourself from actually fulfilling your purpose and your dreams because of the mistakes that you made. Something else that we do is, and I see this a lot in families or with parents, and of course as parents we want the best for our children, and there's a distinction between passing on the information in a way of passing on the wisdom to our children and speaking to them and giving them the advice that we want them to learn from our mistakes. That's one thing. But what I'm talking about is when we start to live through our children. And because we already messed up our lives, let's go ahead and push our kids through and let them know that, drinking is bad because, when I was younger, I partied it up and I did all this stuff. And that puts a lot of pressure on the kids. So just something for you guys to really think about and look at yourselves. And it's like, really start to look at your life and accept the fact that you have made mistakes, that you have screwed up. And you're going to. It's going to keep happening. That's a part of life. That is something that I can guarantee you. It's up there with taxes and death. You're going to keep screwing up. But it's okay. And allow that to be a message. Whether it's a message for your life, whether it's a message for others around you, that in spite of the fact that you've screwed up so badly in your mind, that you can still keep going. And that's part of the process. That is part of our journey, is to keep going, and we're going to fall and we get up and just keep pushing through that. And then, as I mentioned, self-acceptance, I mentioned this in the last segment, self-acceptance is a big piece, and that's something that people really, really are looking for. And so I encourage you to start looking and paying attention to all those messes, and really, what is the lesson there? What is the message to yourself or to somebody else? Something that's happened to me when I was younger, and again, it's like, it's not something that I'm proud of, but it was a big mess. I was a hot mess. I mean, I did some pretty bad things to the point where I was actually kicked out and I was homeless for about a year with a son. He was a few months old. And, my family at the time, they didn't know what to do with me, so they just kicked me out, and I was out on the street, and I was still partying it up and still being irresponsible. And I made a big mess of my life and potentially my son's life. Luckily, he was young enough to where I hope it didn't affect him. He's now a great 17-year-old kid, working and going to school and has a girlfriend and starting to look like a very positive, prosperous life. And in spite of my mistake, in spite of my mess, and I was able to turn my life around in spite of my mess. It's like others could very easily hang on to the fact like, oh, well, my family did this. Well, no, I pushed my family to that extreme. I gave them no choice. I tied their hands, and instead of me being a victim about it, which I was for a while, I got over that, and I took responsibility for my life, and now that mess is my message, because I have worked in domestic violence shelters and I've worked in other arenas where I can go back to that story and be like, hey, you know what? Yes, it sucks where you're at. I get it. I hear you. I've been there. But you too, no matter where you're at, can make that mess into a message, and you can look back to what you were doing and what was happening then and say, hey, you know what? Holy cow. I was in the lowest point of my life, and in spite of that, I still made it happen, and look at where I'm at now. So my message to you is go back, take a look at all the messes that you've made, and really think about the messages that can come through that. Okay, so I invite you to come back next week I'm going to have my guest Art Sanchez from The Art of Detail come in and join the show, where he's going to share a little bit about his experience on what it's like to start a business, and he's attended a few personal development and leadership courses, and he's going to share his experience on that. So I look forward to hearing back from you. Oh, the other thing before I forget, please look me up on Facebook, Angie Torres, or Life Changing Solutions, and send me a message. Let me know if there's a specific topic that you want to talk about, or something that you would like for me to cover, if you want to be a guest on the show, or just give me some feedback. Okay, so thank you guys. See you next week. Bye.